ain't going back. Not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide. Gonna let all the fear slide. Got mother nature is on my side. Got a hold of the loving.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the New Now. I'm here once again with Nathaniel Gillis. We were going to wait a little while before we did our second one, but surprise, surprise, it seems we both decided that the stars aligned and we're having our second one pretty quick after the first. Hello, Nathaniel. Welcome back.
Thank you, my friend. It's great to be back with you. Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm hoping to do a much deeper dive then. We covered a whole bunch of areas. I just watched, parts of our chat from a few days ago. And well, someone asked us about egregores and what that means. So let's get into that a little bit and then we'll take it from there. Or egregore.
Yeah, so an egregore essentially is an entity that cannot and does not exist outside of human belief. Essentially, if, and this is quite a fascinating subject, but the being itself is not existing, and then the consciousness of the experiencer or of the individual will produce it purely by believing in it. It's an interesting hypothesis, but I believe 100% that there are intelligences that have the ability to project a shape, a life form in the consciousness itself. And then when that person believes in it, it has to manifest. And so this kind of highlights one of the nuances of the phenomenon where belief does play a major role.
Yeah,
And it's something that I've been fascinated as of late. Yeah.
yeah, no, I would agree. Maybe the belief plays a role into how we experience the manifestation of the
Right.
demons. What do you think about that?
I believe that is the case to a degree. A lot of this deals with perhaps the ignorance of our own species, ignorance of the soul, ignorance of what role belief plays in all of this. Matter of fact, there's this concept that not only was it an egregore, but it actually pre-existed this manifestation. And what do I mean by that? That's a concept, that's a theory. It's almost like a construct. There exists a probability, my friend, that this being or these beings, plural, actually existed, but they needed us to become form, to become something, to become matter. And so, like, one of the great references I make from the Bible is, I love it, is it was the concept of idolatry.
Right.
And I only say it's a great reference because I think that this principle is profound to the authors. But idolatry was not just, okay, I believe in something and therefore it's created. It's never was the case. The idea behind idolatry was that there's something that wants you to believe in it. And by virtue of agreeing and aligning with it, it becomes manifested and incarnate in this world. And so the idea behind it was that, long before the idolater molded the image of the entity had molded the mind of the idolater. And so there is kind of a what I call a protocol of belief present to where it's not just an egregore, there's something existential, a big word, ontological there to where I cannot become me without you. And so this kind of, this is why I
Right.
always consider it to be it's a symbiotic relationship. But this is another route to this phenomenon is it's also connected to idolatry. But it talks about how these ancient idolaters would go to artificers of metal and they would say, listen, I have this concept of a god. And he would, let's say it's a he, would give the dimensions of this deity to the artificer of metal. And this individual would create the structure, a statue. And then the practitioner would take that statue back to his house. He would place it in a safe and sacred place. And what an awful phrase. Place it in a sacred, yeah, space rather. Place it in a sacred space designated to the god. And then while he's at home sleeping, something would crawl out
Mm.
of that statue. And whatever crawled out of the statue had the same dimensions, had the same shape and form. And so, whereas the idea of an egregore has succeeded in saying, okay, consciousness and belief play a role, This phenomenon at times can transcend that and move a little deeper in the sense that consciousness and belief plays a role in birthing. Not just, okay, yeah, they were created. No, they existed out in the ether, but they took the mortal portal of belief to manifest into this dimension.
Well, why do you think they want to manifest? Why do you think they need matter? Why does matter matter, so to speak?
Very good point. Yeah, that was awesome too. I like that better than my
Yeah,
safe space thing.
yeah.
Uh, well, I believe that a lot of these are intelligences that have the disability of being without being a being, in that having form, it kind of is the collection of consciousness within one local area. And so this is the idea of creating bodies to inhabit and then biological avatars. And this also gets back into some of the more ancient understandings of a demon and what they were in the form of mutated consciousness, something that had no true body, that had no true location. And so they would wander aimlessly, often guided by some mindless, unguided process. Just not there. I don't know why I'm here. What's going on? I want this. And so the earliest text I've been able to find regarding this phenomenon, ritual bowls in Mesopotamia, in some of the text in biblical literature, but it was mutated consciousness that wanted to be localized, that wanted to inhabit something that literally possessing an image. And so that's why our earliest texts regarding possession were not found in churches or even defined by something malevolent, but they were funerary rites where someone was on their deathbed and they would instruct their family members to say, "Okay, listen, create something for me to inhabit."
After you're gone,
And
after they're gone, they mean.
correct. Now,
All right.
one of these references is found in the certain Curly expedition. It's called the Katamua inscription. And Katamua was a Turkish leader in the late Iron Age. And he discusses this and he says, listen, create an image for me, and I will place my soul into that image. And so that's why, when, with respect to the hybridization program, as we see it right now, our ancestors looked at these beings not just as biological avatars, but as effigies possessed by consciousness that at the moment of death lodged themselves and literally got tired of inhabiting statues and steles. Now they want a biological body, something that matches the apparition possessing it. And that's why I think it's absolutely vital, especially within demonology, anybody that wants to understand the complexities of demonology and possession phenomenon, don't start at the Vatican, go back to antiquity. And I'm not poo-pooing them, but I'm saying go to the roots. Just like I told you guys the last show, don't go to the branches, go to the roots, because then and only then will you see the reasoning behind the idea that I want to create a body to place myself in.
So what happened to Katamua? Did he come back? Do you know? Like, is that something that
It's
you know?
very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, his ancestors claimed to have communication with him. And this whole concept is kind of couched in not just funerary rites, but the concept of placing an altar in its presence, right? His presence, and then performing rituals that he gave them. If you perform A, B, and C for me on the other side, you will enable me to become more manifested on this side. And so there was this, once again, we see it, symbiotic relationship between us and them. This is even mirrored in do this in remembrance of me in the Bible when Yeshua was giving them bread to break. This is my body, right? This is my blood. Do this in remembrance of me. And so what we're looking at, even within the biblical spectrum, is the idea that what we do on earth somehow affects the other side, in that there is this kind of relationship, obviously, but if you do this, then I can do this. And where else have we seen that? Not just in funerary texts, not
Right.
just in the Bible, but what we discussed the last show.
Where else have we seen it? Which part did we discuss, do you mean?
Yeah, so in reference to the altars that were built to contact alleged extraterrestrials. So yes, at the very first breaths of that idea, it did not stem from just possession, horns and hooves. It came from people divinizing their ancestors
Right.
and saying, there is non-localized consciousness here. How can we localize it? How can we anchor it? And then that is when we see some of the darker nuances manifest.
So let's look at the symbiotic bits you just mentioned into the why
Mhm.
would you want to localize? To me, it seems you don't want to do that, right? But so why would
Right.
like what do you mean by symbiotic relationship as opposed to parasitic relationship?
Yeah, so the symbiosis here is witnessed when their ancestors, specifically the Katamua, would build him an altar, create a sacred space, and they would perform the rituals according to what that entity wanted and needed.
Hmm.
And so if the rituals themselves were performed to a T, I mean, everything, wear this, I want this kind of food, I want this kind of sacrifice, then it was believed that the divinized ancestor would begin to communicate with them and give them insights into the afterlife. Hmm.
Hmm.
Where, so yeah, that's how this phenomenon first manifested a long time ago. Like, not, I mean, long before the idea of fallen angels, there was the idea that our ancestors go to a place, they become our mediators,
Right.
and in order for them to create a place for us, both here and there, we have to pay homage to them.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Very strange.
Very Japanese too, even with the ancestors
Yeah,
and the shrines. They still have that kind of a belief system that the ancestors are there to help you. And if you don't
right,
offer them what you need to offer them, they become yokais or bad gods, let's say, or demons, as opposed
right.
to helpful entities, which is very interesting that everywhere in the world they seem to have something similar to that. I mean, I still haven't had a grasp on like the mercantile. Humans are very mercantile. Is like what they get out of this. Like,
Right.
what like I can obviously understand if you look at the modern world, it seems to me we touch base on this a little bit, TV and movies and shows and sigils and logos and even music.
Mhm.
The monetary, let's say, or the physical benefits of this. What do you feel about that?
Well, again, when we're looking at what they believed and the reason behind the gifts, the offerings, the altars, and even feasts,
Mm,
like feasts were created, not just to honor, but in a sense, our memory of them here helped determine their existence there. Very strange stuff, very strange concepts being presented. But they would often get insights. This is what a spirit looks like.
mm,
That all spirits are made of the same substance, but they are not all the same status.
mm,
And even more than that, even in the debug phenomenon, we had alleged disembodied beings, ghosts, who would ask for prayers. Matter of fact, there is a Kabbalistic exorcist who went to bed one night and in a dream, one of his favorite students who had passed away before, one of his favorite students met with him, called him by name, Master. I need help. I need some assistance. I will come to you tomorrow. And so the next day, this exorcist goes about his normal routine, eats dinner. He's thinking there's nothing going on. I'm just gonna take a shower, whatever, and bathe, whatever. And I'm gonna put a robe on and go to bed. And sure enough, as soon as he's in bed, he gets a knock at the door. He opens the door. There's a mother holding the hand of a little girl. The little girl looks at him and says, "Hello, master. I
mhm.
told you I would come. I need your help." What did he need? He needed prayer.
Why?
I don't know. That's the mystery. So, but what this does more than anything, it gives us certain insights. Of course, not the whole picture, but certain insights into what allegedly matters in the netherworld. However, what we cannot discount is that there are intelligences that have worn the disembodied as a mask to where when we approach them, when we build altars for them, when we obey certain guidelines and principles at the moment of consummation, Then we realized this was not Dear Aunt Edna. This was nothing like that. And then we have to ask ourselves, if we are in fact intellectually honest, we have to ask ourselves, what is truly occurring here? And what stands out to me more than anything is that despite the mask and despite the proto-intelligence, there are certain things that they request. And that has been common. It has not changed. And that's one of the anchors that myself and my colleagues are looking at, to where, like I said in the last interview, it doesn't matter the incarnation. There are certain things that transcend religion and geography.
May I ask you what you're looking for in your studies, like why you got into, demonology as a demonologist, like what you're hoping
Yeah.
to discover in your sabbatical for your new, next level of research?
Well, I'm doing that for a multitude of reasons. Number one, I do a lot of shows, and there are a lot of people that follow my work. And yet, when I'm doing 2 or 3 shows a day, 3 or 4 shows a week, to a certain point, I repeat myself. And and I don't want to do that. I want to stay fresh and give something that's hot off the press, if you will. So in
Hmm.
order to do that, I have to kind of create and structure new material. Not only that, but I need a break. I'm getting burned out, and it's been crazy. So that's my second. The third reason, though, and this is the most important to me, is that I want to structure new research and actually create a kind of a thesaurus of new vocabulary. Um, Myself and others, what we find ourselves doing is lacking anything, like any way to articulate the phenomenon. It's not that the words aren't there and they don't exist. It's just that we have not taken the time to say, okay, this kind of phrase is too narrow.
Right.
This one's too right, it's too wide and broad. So that's my primary reason as to why I'm taking a break. Hopefully, that when I return, I will have a clearer, more concrete, fleshed out concept.
Of
It's not
a concept
of
of
what we're dealing
the
with.
demons, you
There are
mean, or the aliens or the ET, like all
the
together.
pro altogether. There,
Right.
yeah, there are certain case studies that make me question everything. I mean, it's not an accident that there are UFO abduction accounts that are preceded
Right.
by haunting events,
Right.
haunting phenomena. And I mean, shadow people, for instance. So if this is all connected, then it's possible that the entire paranormal field, myself included, we need to take a step back and look at it as a single entity. And I think that if and when we do that, there are things that are going to change for us. We're going to start seeing things clearer, and then we're going to get to the root of the matter.
Well, have you guys or have you personally looked into the native perspective on Waitiko, which sounds very similar to me? Is that something?
Yeah, mind virus. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that is the parasitic nature. I mean, if we go into, I know somebody in the comments mentioned Jerry Marzinsky. I love his research. Matter of fact, I hopped on a Zoom call with him and Michelle DeVries
Hmm.
about 2 years ago now. We talked for about an hour and a half. I've always loved his work as well as hers. But yeah, the nature of possession, I believe, is largely misunderstood because it's been monopolized, it dominated by religiosity. And when what we do though is we look at the parasitic nature of possession. Okay, we put labels on it, we slap a face on the phenomenon, and say, all right, now we have the authority to limit their abilities. They can only do A, B, and C. They can't do
Right, right.
D, E, and F. And that's just not true.
I would agree.
That's one of the reasons why I am often castigated because I claim to be a demonologist, or that's more of the research I lean into. But that doesn't mean that I believe strictly within the religious lens of the phenomenon. I mean, just there are certain cases, anybody can pick up a book about possession. It's like, okay, that doesn't fit at all. And so I was faced with the decision of, okay, do I limit myself to the dogma? Or do I grow out of it? And so I decided to grow out of the dogma and into the data. And now I'm in an area of research where I now have the intellectual freedom to say, okay, that might not fit this model, but we're learning more about it.
Well, what would your take be on the mind virus?
Yeah, that gets into there are beings that feed on fear. The being I encountered in my youth did exactly that. A lot of what it would project upon me, it was not me at all. It would actually find like holes in my heart, consciousness, fears, anxieties, negative emotions, and it would kind of tailor its attack according to my vulnerabilities.
Mm.
And what's crazy is there were no altars. Obviously, I didn't do that. I made no sacrifices, and yet there still was this symbiosis present. And I realized that the more fear, first of all, the fear it would project did not come from me. It's a projection, so it came from it. But now we're getting back into the egregoric theory that the more I believed in it, the more I agreed with some of the negative thoughts. That's when it became even more powerful, and it anchored itself in my own life. So there is this parasitic nature, and mind you, not just within that phenomenon, but also within the alien abduction phenomenon. There are case studies within that realm, even with, especially with Ted Rice, where there is no other explanation save an entity tormenting. There were no harvested secrets. It was just actual torment. And a lot of ufology, they want to ignore that because it starts to change their paradigm.
Right.
It's hard to sell t-shirts like that.
Impossible even. Yeah.
Right. Nobody wants to come to that conference.
Well, what about let's get back to the holes in your heart, as you mentioned, because that's been
Yeah.
a fascinating study of mine. So they took advantage of said holes. How would you describe those holes in your heart?
Just, well, that particular time in my life was difficult. And I was trying to find my place. Who was I? I wasn't very good at schoolwork. I had ADHD, still have it. And it was stressful. And so just being in a new house, that in itself has its anxieties. But I don't know. I don't even know why I saw it. We're all still trying to understand that point. Why is it that nobody in my family experienced that? Why was I alone in that room and dealing with it? None of it makes sense. And there's only two. I mean, I'm leaning towards that. None of it makes sense until we find one thing, and then it all comes in line. And so that's what we're all after.
The one thing.
But the one thing, yeah. So there are pieces to this puzzle. We're just looking to see how they fit together. But I don't know why it targeted me, but I can tell you that it found me at what was my most vulnerable point. You know, hitting puberty and just trying to get adjusted, finding new friends, forgetting old, just evolving, growing older, and yet being so vulnerable. I mean, even when it manifested, now I think about it, at night when I was alone at my most vulnerable point. And I believe that plays a major role. Even when we're asleep, a lot of these experiences start when we're asleep. Why?
Seems
and this
yeah, a lot of your life has mirrored my life at a similar age and similar experiences.
Right. Well, yes. So I'm not alone, thank God.
No.
But yeah, so this is one of my arguments against the idea that it's all love and light. How would, why is it that if these beings are so evolved and so powerful and technologically advanced, why would they choose to teach through trauma?
It's a good question.
I have a hard time dealing with that.
Well, I think maybe it's not so much a teaching, but as an experience of if you go back into Lush or Waitiko and the mind virus, could be how they harvest what it is they're looking for from the humans as far as worship and awareness. And
Right.
going back to maybe what you mentioned in our last video, the gifting field.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe we can go into that a little bit, like a little bit deeper of that phenomenon, what went on at that moment in time, according to what you found out.
In terms of the gifting field and that whole scenario?
Yes.
Well, the idea would be that, again, this goes back to funerary rites, which, by the way, I'll get to that in a second. But by the way, I wanted to mention this before, but I forgot. Possession phenomenon originated by virtue of mutated consciousness seeking to become, again, the disembodied, the discarnate. Matter of fact, in the Bible, the idea of being possessed came from the touching of a corpse. It was called corpse pollution. It was in the book of
Right.
Numbers. And so when a person goes into a house and there's a dead body, don't touch it. Why? Because whatever is in that corpse will come after you. And
Mm.
so then they introduced the open vessel law, which was the consciousness of that corpse defiles everything that it possesses. And so the new homeowners would go in after, they clean the house, obviously take care of the body. The new homeowners would go in, and whenever they would take food in jars, but they were told to close the jars with the lid. Why? Because the consciousness would also possess any emptiness it could find.
Mm.
Now,
Interesting.
that's true in both two ways. It's profound, but it's true in both ways. Number one, that's why they prescribed the exorcistic rite was not to rid someone from horns and hooves. It was designed to eject consciousness that wanted to commandeer a new body.
Hmm.
Now, we see this especially within Katamua when he said, listen, my consciousness will possess metal. Then we see that evolution. It's almost like technology in the sense that now we're saying, okay, I'm going to carve the name of that entity into metal, and I'm going to implant that into an actual body. And so if you look at the archaeological record, you see the evolution of, okay, I'm going to be in that stele, right? Oh, no, no, no. Now I'm going to be in a body.
Mm.
And then, no, no, no. Now I'm going to create a fetus to inhabit. So there are stages of development that a proper researcher, if we go back far enough, we can notate and we can mark and highlight. That alone, I believe, will get us to the point we are now where we can properly understand why it is that a lot of what our experiences are saying, hey, it feels like a soul is in this craft.
Mm. Very interesting. I mean, I'm very much interested in the holes of the heart that the demons seem to
Yeah.
illuminate for us. And it was fascinating to me that you
Mhm.
mentioned that, as in my experiences, I can only talk from that, showed me where I had troubles with love, relationships, as
Mhm.
you said, puberty, the opposite sex, fitting in, etc. And it seems, from my understanding in discussing these topics with others of like experience, they've all had
Mhm.
that sort of a catharsis before getting into the field.
Right. Yeah, it's very strange. It's almost like being initiated.
Yes.
That's the only way I can explain it.
Didn't Jesus
But
supposedly spend 40 days and 40 nights fighting his demons in the
indeed,
desert
indeed.
before he overcame? I've heard.
Yes, yes. Which, yeah, yeah, he died before he died. And that's one of the more Gnostic ideas that we see presented. If you die before you die, you won't die when you die. So this is this again, this idea that this is interesting too, that there are some people um, that die and they evolve. It's like they're good, and this is getting back to some of the ancient concepts of the soul and the nefesh in dealing with consciousness. But there are some people that can die and evolve, and that's where you get your malakuma in Ugaritic text, which was a divinized ancestor. You could have died and went one way, but you died and went another.
Ugaritic. What's a Ugaritic? You mean
Ugaritic. It's
yoga?
it's
What's
no, it's an ancient language, an ancient language.
how would you spell that?
So
Ugarit.
Ugarit.
It's interesting that they have different phenomena here in Japan. Yokai comes
Mhm.
from, and maybe that was one of the original languages that it seems to have originated from, Ugaritic yokai, which is just, a disembodied energy that's neither good nor bad, but
Right.
has a different kind of life, different kind of experience, more of a phenomenon.
Correct. Correct. And we see this, it's very prevalent, very prevalent. Um, but yeah, so getting back to this idea of what an angel was prior to the Hebrew scholars taking it and kind of adjusting it and then, implementing and writing about it in the text. It was Ugarit. So the idea of the Malakuma was a deceased ancestor that at the moment of death, he evolved or they evolved into something more than human. Still had human characteristics, still was conscience and consciousness, but it possessed other characteristics that transcended the human experience. And so the Ugaritic idea of an angel was the divinized ancestor. And so the term Malakim, Malakuma, was then retranslated and reincorporated by Hebrew scholars. Same word, Malakim. Even the king, Malek.
Mm.
And so they just kind of retranslated it back into their theology. But we start to see this narrative reveal itself when you look at the Witch of Endor. And by the way, people are going to, especially, if you're Christian evangelical who watch this, if you don't believe me, go into this book, go buy this book, Women's Divination in Biblical Literature by Professor Esther Amori. She also just wrote a book called God's Monsters. I'm getting it. It's going to be incredible. Can't wait. But in this book, she goes down and breaks down the Hebrew language employed in that text. And this was not a familiar spirit. This was an Elohim, which is never used for a familiar spirit. And an Elohim in this text, which was the Witch of Endor, being approached by Saul. Saul wanted to communicate with the prophet Samuel. Sure enough, here comes the apparition of the prophet Samuel. And she says an Elohim comes out of the earth. Now, in the King James, it says it's a God. So already we're starting to see the footnotes and manifestation of a belief that a lot of us, at least we didn't know existed at that time, was that there are some who can die and evolve. And that next step of evolution does not end their humanity. It prolongs it. It solidifies it. And the only way I can explain it is that it's not Gandalf the Grey anymore. It's the Lord of the Rings reference. It's Gandalf the White. And that's why she was so astounded was, you mean you want me to contact this? I'm getting out of the way here. What is that? And so there are nuances that point to some ancient beliefs that are important to notice. I mean, if we took that idea and applied it to modernity, then we would get into the question of what is consciousness? Does consciousness have a constitution to it? Can you reach out and touch it? Right? Is it an apparition? Can it materialize then dematerialize? And if you took the entirety of all the writings, specifically about the death, birth, the afterlife, in the angel tradition, it all stems from the belief that there are people that can turn into something, and that something can be communicated with. I hope that makes sense.
Well, yeah. Well, if you die before dying and then you don't die, would you say that perhaps these we won't have to give them a name, that these things that we're talking about, demons, if you like, aliens, ET, gods, divinized ancestors, what have you, are actually helpful and not harmful if looked at from the right perspective?
If looked at, we have to be careful though, again, because do I believe that there are people that have died and evolved? Yes. But there also appears to be this kind of recruiting campaign going on. We see this when abductions take place and the person is told, you're going to be beautiful when you join us.
Well, look at the cell
What
phones
is
of
that?
ladies these days. I mean, that's
Right.
exactly what seems to be going on. You'll be beautiful if you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's almost like some of these beings are recruiting people while they're alive. We've also seen this in out-of-body abductions where the experiencer is placed on a chair. This specific case study, she's out of body. She's placed on a chair and she's taught how to fly the craft. But when she goes back into her body and the next day, what did you really learn? And there was no muscle memory. Wasn't there.
What was there?
And what was there was the memory of getting on the craft and the memory of, okay, they're going to train me how to fly it, but no memory of, okay, this is what you do. This is how you do it. And even some other case studies where some people do remember it, but it's not muscle memory, it's consciousness.
What's the
Where
difference?
yeah. The
What
difference would be it's embodied. The other one is I'm out of body.
interesting.
So not muscle memory. And it's okay, I get it. I'm going to do this. It was consciousness. And in a lot of these cases, again, that they're educating and maturing the soul in a way, or the
Our soul,
astral
you
body,
mean?
we can call it.
Our
Yes.
soul. So you mean they're educating and our astral body maturing or
That
helping
seems to
us?
be the case.
Right.
Um, I think so. I think that would be help. I don't know. I mean, the truth is, we don't know at that point. I mean, right now we're still trying to quantify what consciousness is. They're treating consciousness like it's the body,
Yeah.
but it's not, right? This is how you do it. Well, how do I do it? And but there is this again, it's pervasive. Even Kenneth Arnold, when he encountered what people call flying saucers, he told them, he said, listen, guys, he goes, I don't know what they were. I don't know what it was,
Mm,
but the immediate impression was that this had something to do with the afterlife.
right.
Like in that emotion, that presence that he experienced along with witnessing it is I think that's profound, and we need to think more about that as a field. There's something ontological here, and it's not just consciousness. There's something beyond that.
Right. Well, we all know, or at least I know, that a challenge is always good in life, right? Life without
Mhm.
challenges doesn't help you to grow. He who makes the most mistakes becomes the wisest, etc. It
True,
seems to
true.
me that as much as being haunted doesn't sound like fun, being challenged is where it's at as far as growing up in life.
Mhm. Right. Correct. And what strikes me the most about some of these out of body case studies is their ability to trigger that out of body experience at will. There is some of the Collins elite research.
I mean,
They were
the person can trigger their own,
person, the
right? Okay.
purse, or the phenomenon rather, from my side, the phenomenon. But there are case studies that the Collins elite researched where there was a correlation between what was witnessed from a near death experience and what was witnessed from an out of body experience. They were
Right.
I mean, they're virtually the same anyway. Um, but in some of these abductions, like there was one lady that the Collins elite researchers worked with who said, "Look, I was on a dirt road one night, just driving, and I saw this ball of light approach my car." And she said, "I got out of my car, looked up at it, and instantly I'm out of my body looking down at it." And it's disturbing. I mean, there are cases, I think I mentioned this in the last show, where people have been in catastrophic accidents and threatened, if you do not obey us when we want you to obey us, and if you don't do what we want you to do, we'll get you. It's essentially, it's a very simple way to put it, but yeah, we'll be there. And we're not exactly physical.
So what do you mean
That's
by
what's so weird.
how did the catastrophic accident lead to that? We didn't talk about that last time.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that's cool. I didn't talk about. Okay, well, this individual was a young man. He had a catastrophic car accident, and he said he remembered him leaving his own body, looking down at it, and he said the next thing I know, I'm in this metallic room, and there are these beings that are conversing with me, and they told me you are going to die. You are out of your body. Not only that, but your doctors, your physicians on earth, they cannot help you. They will not be able to save your life. We can and we will if you agree to say what we want you to say when the time comes. And
Say,
so,
oh, okay. To say,
yeah,
did they give him or did he share more details after
mm-mm,
that? What did he want?
no, no, we don't know what they wanted him to say,
Right.
but they said that there is a time coming, and we want to use you as our mouthpiece. And if you agree to that, we'll hold you to it, but we'll put you back into your body, and you will wake up at an ambulance, and you will survive. So,
I'm guessing
what
he
would
did
that be
survive.
called?
I'm guessing he did
He did
survive.
survive. Correct, correct.
Do you know any
But
more about that experience
no,
after?
no,
Okay.
unfortunately not. But he's not alone in that. There are a lot of people who've experienced this kind of spiritual and deeply esoteric connection. I mean, I have to add that into the list of words here. But more than anything else, my friend, it kind of fell underneath the umbrella of OBE, NDE, and soul abduction. And the problem that we have now in the field is not just the compartmentalization of the intelligence, but the idea that there are beings that need crafts, but these beings have access to areas of our species we ourselves are ignorant of
Right.
and can trigger it at will. I mean, let's look at this one, for instance. So there's a documentary out there about the shooting in Las Vegas.
Right.
And one of the victims was a mother, and she was there with her family. And she said, the only thing I remember, she said, I remember getting shot in the head. She said, but I floated out of my body and I'm looking around at my family, wondering why they're all crying. She goes, I was at peace and I wasn't hurting. She said, but she's like, I didn't understand what happened. I was out of my body. She said, but I was in two places at once. This is obviously it's called bilocation, but we also see this in the Betty Luca case study where they brought her into her body, they brought her into a room, and when she crossed the threshold, it split her into two. And they asked her, do you remember being in two places at once to where there were two of you? We've also seen it back to Betty Luca. She was going to bed one night. She walks into her room, and there her husband is putting socks on. He's sitting on the bed. She said, I blinked, looked away, looked back again. Now his body is stationary, but his soul or his astral body, whatever we want to call it, is walking towards her, screaming.
Mm-hmm.
Two places at once. So if this phenomenon has that ability, I'm not saying that it has the ability just to say, okay, I'm in two places at once. No, where it's weird because the experiencer knows it,
Yeah.
and then the witnesses are seeing it at the same time. Very fascinating. I think it's incredible.
I mean, couldn't that be related to one of the theories I've heard of living in a mirror world? Maybe at that
Mhm.
moment we're seeing both sides of our lives, this side and the other side, or the soul side and your physical side. And
Right.
like who's watching that though? Like what's interesting is you say she, and I could say
Mhm.
because I've had this experience, right? So
Mhm.
she saw herself at two places.
Right.
So, but who is seeing her at two places, right? What's the
Right.
consciousness we're discussing? So maybe she's even in three places because somebody or something is watching her in two places. And so, how is she
Mhm.
observing that? That to me, that's a fascinating study in itself.
Oh, it's an incredible study. I one of my good friends, he's also a paranormal researcher, and he got his start in this field probably like you and I. We encountered something in our youth and it inspired us to research. But his case is really interesting to me. He said that he was a child. He's laying in his bed at nighttime, and he said, Nathaniel, he said, I would often get sick, really sick. He said, sometimes I'd be hospital.
Me too.
Do what?
Me too.
Oh, you too. Okay, I'm
When I was
sorry.
a child. No, I'm just saying
Yeah.
me too when I was little. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird. But he said that he would be sleeping in his bed or he would be awake and sick and just he didn't understand it. He would often ask his mom, like, why don't I get to go out and play with my friends? Why don't I get to go to school? Why am I always sick? And he said one night his parents are asleep. He's trying to fall asleep, but he can't because he's sick. And he said that he notices this being in the corner of the room. And he said, I'm looking at it. I can barely see it in the shadows, but something's there. He said, next thing I know, I'm slowly being pulled out of my body. He said, now I'm staring down at it and I'm hovering near the ceiling. And that's when he said, I looked around and I noticed that that being was no longer in the corner. He said, I asked myself, where is he now? Where did he go? I start searching the room. He said, I couldn't find him. Then a voice came out of my body. And that's when it started looking, his body started looking around the room, speaking in an unknown language. And at the very end of his experience, he said, then it looked up at me. And now I'm staring into my own eyes.
Mm.
But this points to, again, them having access to our species in uncomfortable and very much misunderstood ways. This should not be taking place.
Why not?
And well, according to the umbrella of the understanding, rather, that we are our own, and as long as you follow certain rules, they have no access. Well, I think it goes against rights. I don't think that's a good thing to do that to a child, to pluck his own consciousness out of his body, to commandeer the body, to look around through his own eyes.
But didn't it change him? Like you said, he became a
Ter
demonologist.
well, a researcher, yeah, it
A
terrorized
researcher.
him.
Yeah, but maybe he's doing what he's doing because, like, I can say from my experience, I can't
Yeah.
talk about someone else. I don't want to
Mhm.
theorize, but some of the horrible experiences I've had of a similar nature, I can talk
Right,
about a dream I had when I first. It's funny you mentioned the stresses of a new house. The first night
right.
I slept in a new house when I was in kindergarten. My parents still live in that house. I had an experience where something took me out of my body into the wall, and for years I still
Mhm.
won't sleep beside a wall when I go to bed at night
Mhm.
because I was taken out and through and put back in the morning. And this was when I
Mhm.
was, kindergarten. How old are you? 5 when you're in kindergarten? I'm not even sure anymore. Something of that nature. And it's allowed me to grow into the being I've become through the terror.
Mhm.
So is your friend
Mhm.
having a good life now? Curious, do you know?
I don't know. He seems to be. He got a happy marriage, good job. He has a business. It's a business. But this gets back to the idea that I think there has to be easier ways to teach than through terror and trauma, because not everybody is as lucky as he was.
Right.
There are some people who've lived with that presence where it's chronic,
Mm.
and it hasn't been all well. And also, there's something, again, this is another reason why I'm taking the month off. There's something wrong with this entire picture. I mean, when we go into investigations and we're there for 2 or 3 hours and we capture nothing, nothing,
Define wrong with the picture. What do you mean wrong?
incomplete.
Okay, that makes sense.
Uh, you know, I've been on investigations before where, like I said, we're there for 3 hours, nothing, absolutely nothing. And uh, we know that the phenomenon is present,
Right.
but it's not there. And so it's weird because, again, it's there, it's present with, but absent from. And then the next day we go in to do the same thing, right? It's same equipment, same intentions,
So
same
you mean you're
methodology.
studying a person that's had an experience and you're trying to, like, what's the intent of the experiments with
Well, I'm
said
talking like within the
subject?
context, yeah, I'm talking about within the context of like invasion, or not invasions, but investigations into homes and
Gotcha.
residences. Yeah, commercial properties. But what strikes me odd is that, you could be there
Mm.
and okay, the experience, yeah, an hour before you got here, right? I saw this, or this happen. And so I'm thinking, all right, we should be able to collect something, get some data here. No, ice cold.
Mm.
And so, and then the next investigation, it's the same process, same methodology, same equipment, same people. And yet you get something to where it's irrefutable evidence.
Mm.
And this is what I mentioned in the last interview, where the phenomenon makes eye contact with you. So the real question behind this is, why is it choosing one day over the other?
So,
Why is it choosing to hide and then the next day say, oh, by the way, I just want you to know I am here? It makes no sense to me at this point.
well, did you have an experience where the phenomenon made eye contact with you?
Mm, yeah, in times past, yeah, and even some of the investigations I've been on working with individuals.
What was that like?
Um, Fear, terror, and fear and terror in a way that could have turned into an existential crisis. And what's so weird about all of this is what comes to me is not usually the entity that I encountered in the home. Because, I hear these people say, okay, it made me feel this and that and
Right.
attacked me this way. It, Whenever I get attacked, it's almost like I face the same emotions I did in my haunted house as a child.
Right.
And
Interesting.
right, that's the finding of the holes in the heart, where it goes down to that initial experience.
So it's
But
it's it's something that's followed you through life in some ways.
yeah,
You.
absolutely.
Oh, fascinating.
And it's not in the sense that it's haunting me, no, but whenever I do see beyond the veil to where they're uncomfortable with it, yes, they will push back, and that's how they do it.
I ask you a personal question.
Depends.
Okay.
Just kidding.
How old were you? Let's say I couldn't help but notice the tattoo on
Mhm.
your left side and you turned around to grab a book. Like
Mhm.
how old and why, if you don't mind me asking?
I think it was like 24. 24. This is an homage to the religion I grew up in. It's really it. I went to get a pizza about a month ago or so, and there was an elderly gentleman sitting waiting getting his pizza. He looked at me, he asked the same question, "What's the cross for?" I said, "Calvary." He said, "Well, thank you for serving."
Calvary.
Yeah, he said, "Thank you for serving." I was like, "Okay." The cross, Calvary, all that.
No, like, can you
But
explain that a little bit? Like,
yeah, so that's a reference to Jesus dying on the cross.
oh, gotcha.
Yeah. But he thought I was like serving in the military. So that's pretty cool, but not what I
Ah,
not
also
quite it.
a different kind of Calvary.
Yeah, yeah. One that's very relevant and germane, but yeah, not the same thing. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna get it taken off. I don't like it anymore. But
Have
anyways,
have
so
you
yeah,
found a
that's what we're all.
difference? Like, have you seen, like, if you don't mind my asking, like, have you seen that
Mhm.
as a sigil that's changed something in your body one way or the other since, I guess you mentioned you were 35 last time, so you've had it for about 11 years, I'm guessing, more or less.
Mhm. Yeah, no, nothing's changed, for better or worse.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't, I think we're all in the same boat here. And what I'm going to be doing over the next month is restructuring terms, phrases, and hopefully creating a new vocabulary. I mentioned this before in the show. There's a lot of researchers that have been in this 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Not 60, probably. Maybe,
Maybe.
a little bit older. Yeah, possible, very possible. But who now that we're moving into new research, approaching the phenomenon as a singular intelligence, that we need vehicles of meaning. Whereas in times past, the phenomenon would place us into linguistic paradoxes.
Right.
I don't even know how to say it. And I believe the reason for that is because we've compartmentalized the phenomenon. And the language itself did not fit the model. And so now I'm going to kind of place both of those in line with each other. And then when I get back on shows, I will have hopefully authored something germane to the field.
That sounds interesting. I mean, do you understand or believe in life beyond words?
Yeah, the ineffable exists. I don't want it to exist in this in this context. Uh, you know, but I do believe that exists, and I think sometimes that is with intention. It's not just okay. Like when I hear ineffable, I think of Rudolph Otto's The Idea of the Holy, where there's something that transcends language.
Hmm.
And yet, with this field of research in particular, there are things that we have to be able to articulate. And if one word fails, we have to go in and research a better word, something that's closer to what we're describing. That's why it was one of the steps of confusing us researchers was that's a demon, it's an alien.
Mm.
Those are words designed to, describe beings, and yet they don't fit. They're too narrow of a scope.
I
And
would
so what I'm
agree.
going to do is, yeah, try to, zoom in, zoom out, macro and micro, and kind of sift through the dogma and create a new thesaurus and perhaps dictionary. And then when I return, I'll introduce those, hopefully, if they're
Well,
there.
I would be delighted to share that with our audience and to share that with
100%.
you and to go a little deeper on that. I have several other areas of exploration which maybe we can pick up in another chat. Maybe let's
Mhm.
leave us with this. How would you describe, if you don't mind my asking, what would your definition of evil be, if you have one?
Well, that would be the parasite to benefit purely from the suffering of another.
It's a great definition. Fantastic. I guess you kind of, in some ways, described Waitiko, or the definition of Waitiko, the mind virus, which gets us back
Correct.
to this and the whole phenomenon we've discussed. Yeah.
Correct. And you know what terrorizes some experiencers more than anything?
No.
This is out of the book Taken by Dr. Carla Turner, was the complete immunity to emotion,
Mm.
the clinical nature of the phenomenon, to where it's not that I'm doing this to hurt you in, all that. And it was literally, there's no emotion here.
Mm.
I'm not like, you don't matter. You don't exist to me. And it was the clinical nature of some of these experiences that trouble us the most. I
Mm.
would like to matter,
To to them or to yourself, or what do you mean by you would like to matter?
to anything, to anything. This is an H.P. Lovecraft philosophy of cosmicism, to where there could be entities that are so alien to us, they do not see us as a life form. They see us as an object without matter, without value. And yeah, I'll just do this. And the coldness of it,
I would agree. I would
it's
agree.
terrifying.
It is terrifying. Well, perhaps, when we eat a chicken and don't think about it, could be something
There
similar.
we go. Absolutely.
Like
Good
as you
point.
say, the micro and the macro. If we sit here and, someone picks up a fish and eats it, let's say, and I do that pretty much daily here in Japan,
Mhm.
I don't really think about the feelings of the fish. I'm just, oh my goodness, that looks delicious, and I'm happy for dinner. I wonder if
Yep.
that is part of the phenomenon we've been discussing in some ways.
Absolutely. The symbiotic relationship, us evolving alongside of them, co-evolving with them, by them, monitoring them. And this gets back to the idea that, well, maybe an invasion is not the worst thing that could happen to us.
The hardest to become the best in my life, my experiences. So I have to say, even though, I might have spent years terrorized and in fear and not having a good time, in the end, I've put it all together for myself and come out much better on the other side. But again, I'm only talking from my own personal experiences. You seem pretty well off as well right now, Nathaniel.
I try to be.
You try to be. Well,
I have my good days and bad days. I'm just like everybody else, my friend.
I hear you. All right. Well, perhaps we've come to a natural end in this lovely conversation. We've discussed the egregores, and we've come through some personal experiences. Thank you so much for putting a
No
little bit of
problem.
yourself on the carpet here. I appreciate that. And is there anything you'd like to leave our viewers with before you sign off for a month, let's say, and go off into your journeys of
Uh,
exploration?
yeah, well, looking for new vocabulary, new ways of thinking, and fresh alternative views of this. So when I return, that will hopefully that will be what I present, a thesaurus of new vocabulary. But they're playing by different rules because they're playing a different game.
That's right.
And the theory that I'm proposing, working on now, is that not only is it a singular intelligence, but there are some of us that they did not want to remember what they've done to us. Dr. Carla Turner theorized this in her books, Taken, Into the Fringe, Masquerade of Angels, where because of the blind spots within our species, we cannot determine whether or not all of us are being abducted, or if it's just a small portion. It's possible that all of us are being abducted, and that the only reason we're hearing about these events taking place is because some of us are remembering.
I would,
And when right?
yeah, no, I would
And
say
when we,
everyone's been abducted, especially over the last 4 years. Seems to me
right,
to be the case, anyways, in one way or another.
right. And so when we evolve to a point where some of us realize, wait a minute, I remember something. You weren't that successful in wiping my memory. I can recollect that. I can look back and say you did A, B, and C. Well, now the proto intelligence has to create a story as to why they were doing this. Why? They're doing it in antiquity. They're doing it in modernity. They were doing it in demonic flights. They're doing UFO abduction. It's possible, I should say. I was going to say I'm theorizing, but that's evident. It's possible that a lot of us were not supposed to know this, in that in their programming, they failed. And now some of us are waking up. Oh my God, I've got to tell you my story. And then the phenomenon has to improvise. Well, that's an alien. Now it creates a story to combat the evolution of human consciousness.
Of course, his story, that old saying that
Correct.
what happened is it real? I would say no. Whatever was passed along to me in school, I know 99.9% of it was BS, as I've looked back,
Right.
and
Sadly enough.
sadly
But
enough.
thank you so much for having me, my friend. It was great to be with
Thank you,
you.
Nathaniel. I'll be loving to do it again, and I appreciate it very
Yes,
much,
please.
everyone. If you have any more questions for Nathaniel, leave them below. I'll pass them along as I have this time. If anybody has any other suggestions or recommendations, I will also leave Nathaniel's YouTube channel link below. His website will be up
Thank
when
you.
he's ready, and his new book will be coming out
Soon.
soon, and we'll share that as well. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.
All
Can't
right.
make me lie, lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom.